Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Winter Games and to the Smart Region Summit. I'm Jason Whittet from Amazon Web Services. I'm the Digital Innovation Lead here at the ASU Smart City Cloud Innovation Center. And today, we're going to have a panel and look at the Smart City Lab as a catalyzer for urban innovation. And we've assembled a pretty amazing panel from around the world of people running smart city labs. And I'm using smart city labs, but you could call them accelerators or centers. And it's not necessarily smart cities. You could call it urban innovation, digital government. But I think you get the sense. These centers that are looking to help catalyze innovation in our urban centers. And to kind of frame it a little bit, at Amazon, we have a saying that good intentions alone are not enough. Everyone's got good intentions, but in order to take those good intentions and turn them into action, you need some structure, you need tools, you need a mechanism. And so what we want to explore today is the Smart City Lab as that mechanism that's able to bring stakeholders together, able to be kind of a safe space to explore ideas, nurture them, and then ideally help create some impact. And so to help us with this conversation, again, we've got a pretty amazing panel. And I'm gonna do some quick introductions and then we can just jump in with questions. And we've got a nice group today, so we'd love it to be interactive. Please feel free to use the Zoom chat and make comments or ask questions. And then we're only together for a little bit today. One of the things I always like to say with panels is definitely go on LinkedIn and follow these folks. They're pretty amazing and they're doing great work, and connect into them so you can see what they're doing after this session is over. So with that, let me jump in and just do some quick introductions, and we'll go from there. So why don't I start? I'm going to start with Kulle Tarnov, who's the head of innovation at FinEst Center of Excellence in Tallinn, Estonia. And FinEst is Finland and Estonia. And it's, I think, and Kulle, tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's the only really example of a cross national border collaboration on smart cities. And it's a pretty impressive structure. And hopefully we'll get into that a little bit as we go on. And then going a little bit south, we've got Yael Malatskey, who's also the head of innovation at CityZone in Tel Aviv. And CityZone in Israel, it's a small country, but I think it's got so many amazing smart city startups are coming out of Israel. It's amazing culture of innovation and clearly an amazing center of smart cities. And I want to specifically thank Kulle and Yael. They're staying up a little bit later outside of work hours to join us. So thank you so much for that. And then coming back to the US, Debra Lamb, who is the executive director, you've got a new title, Partnership and Inclusion Innovation at Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech, if you haven't been, is an amazing center of smart cities. And Debra is bringing all of her experience from Pittsburgh, where she led innovation working with Mayor Peduto. And Pittsburgh and Mayor Peduto obviously are, he's a mayor who certainly gets smart cities, and they did so much amazing work. And Debra, I think you brought a lot of that down to Georgia Tech. And I had the opportunity to come to your event about 1.5 years ago and got to go tour some of your labs and see the research and development. And your ability to organize all that is really amazing. So hopefully we can get into a little bit of that. And then going north up to New York, we've got Mark Dowd, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which is the nation's largest transit agency. So he certainly has his hands full. But Mark has had a number of lives. Maybe most importantly to our conversation, he was the architect of the Smart City Challenge, which probably has done more to catalyze and advance, socialize smart cities in the United States. It's mostly known because Columbus won, Columbus, Ohio, but I think the missing fact is that every city that could apply for it in the US did. And I think it really helped to bring people together and get them thinking about what smart city visions could be. So we've got the A team here, and hopefully I can just get out of their way and have a good conversation here. But maybe to start off, why don't I go back to you, Kulle? Could you talk a little bit about the structure of FinEst? Because it really is pretty unique that you were able to build that cross national collaboration. And the Nordics really are known for being a region. And as we're here talking about the Smart Region Summit in Greater Phoenix, I think there's a great synergy, certainly at a much greater scale. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the genesis of that?
Yes, hello, and it's really nice to greet you from far away from Estonia. But yes, the center is really established by TalTech from Estonia, Tallinn, and then from Finland, there is Aalto University that's in Helsinki. So there is 80 kilometers distance of sea between those two countries and between those two capitals. And the cooperation between those cities has been already going on for some years, and different initiatives have been going on. But now this Center of Excellence around smart cities has been established, and the first 7 years of this are also financed by the European Commission. So, but the center is, yes, doing the basic research, but why we are here is that in reality, about half of our tasks is to do really large-scale pilots where the top-level research is connected to the real cities. So what we started from is that together with the Estonian cities, we really identified their main challenges where they need the solutions that could be then like solved using all kinds of smart technologies. Then we announced those top challenges, and the ideas could be then proposed to solve those challenges. And all the teams had to involve top-level researchers from those two universities and minimum 2 cities. And the cities could be from Estonia, but they could also be from other countries. And what is also a little bit unique is that they are really kind of huge projects. So in most of the cases, when we talk about startup projects, that also a lot of competitions go on in Estonia, then usually the grants are, let's say, 15,000 or maximum 50,000. In our case, we can allocate about 1.5 million euros per one project. And the duration is about 29 months. So during that time, the research is done, but also the solutions will get practical and will be piloted in the 2 participating cities during the project age. And then afterwards, we or the spin-off, whatever it will be, and then we'll start to scale it to many other cities, hopefully globally and not only in Estonia and Finland. That's the kind of the basic model around it.
So that's a huge scale. You're talking big projects over a long period of time. And rest of the panel, feel free to jump in with questions if you want. So that's a structure. My understanding is your funding comes from a collaboration between the EU and the nation of Estonia. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of the structure?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so maybe Debra, bringing that back to you, you're also based in a university. How about the structure of the projects you're working on? I know you're doing a lot of research and development. What do you think about like that scale and that duration? How do you kind of address that?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. That's a great question. And I think us in the US, we're always jealous of our European colleagues because of the EU funding in general. Thanks to Mark, we were privy to the US DOT Smart City Challenge a few years back, and that was really helpful to mobilize. But since then, there hasn't been that concerted effort, and that might change in the new administration. But we've had to adapt accordingly and find more creative financing for our smart cities projects. So what we did at Georgia Tech was we did a smart city challenge similar to the US DOT, where we got private sector funding. And so we mobilized the private sector funding and provided grants to the researchers and to the community to do projects. And we selected a cohort of winners. So then there were learnings across the board. We've been lucky enough this year to institutionalize that funding. So now we are under the partnership where we have the money come in from the state of Georgia. So it's in the budget That's annual, recurring, permanent. It's provided by Georgia Tech, which is also annual, permanent, recurring. And then we got multi-year private sector donations. So that's been a big push for us, and it's taken a few years to get to that point. But to your point earlier, is once we were able to institutionalize that funding, that allows us to really think long-term in terms of the development that we're all trying to strive for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see there's a little bit different nuances, right, on how everybody's structured based on what you have for resources and in your running room. Yael, maybe going over to you for a second. So you've got an interesting structure too. You work with a lot of startups, a lot of corporations, as well as the university, as well as the municipality. You've really brought all of those stakeholders together. Can you talk a little bit about that structure and how that works for you at CityZone?
Yes, definitely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. So Israelis are experts in operating on a lean budget with not even a budget at all. So what we do actually, we are sort of like an interesting partnership between the public sector, the private sector, and the academia. We operate on a municipal corporation, which is founded 50% by the municipality of Tel Aviv and 50% by the University of Tel Aviv. So altogether, we have that on board in order to help the startups implement and evaluate their technologies in a real city environment. We have a high-tech and business park area in the northeast of Tel Aviv, where we test all sorts of the technologies and sensors and operate our startup program. Actually, we don't have any specific, other than that specific budget, which, as I mentioned, is a lean budget. So that's why we turn to the ecosystem here in Israel, and we suggest all sorts of different processes and business opportunities to large corporates and multinational companies here in Israel. As you know, I mean, most people heard about Israel as a startup nation. So a lot of big corporates and tech companies come to Israel and Tel Aviv specifically to open their R&D centers. And we basically give them the actual living lab and an area to test whatever they need on a real city environment at CityZone. So for that, they sponsor part of our program, and altogether we succeed to manage and help the startup build a successful product or service to the city and also to the corporates themselves, and help them scale global.
And delicate balance there. One of the things, so at the Innovation Center here at ASU, I mean, I obviously work for a big company. We felt it was really important to have open innovation, and everything we do is open source to try and make it so that it's a clearly a collaborative space. So that's a great balance to be able to manage. Mark, let me go up to you, and any thoughts on that structure? But that's the first part, and then the second part would be, previous in your role, you created the Smart City Lab, and I noticed you had a number of not cohorts, but kind of tranches that you created. Kind of segueing into, all right, once you've got your Smart City Lab, what do you do with it? How do you focus? Cities certainly have no shortage of problems. What are the ones that kind of lend themselves to being worked on in that environment? And any thoughts on how you structured that, or where you think Smart City Labs can really make an impact?
So, a lot of what we talk about is transportation related stuff, right? Yeah. In establishing Smart City Lab, what I did was just essentially, when I was in the Obama administration, worked hard to get the cities to connect with each other, work with each other. They still make fun of me because when they all came to DC, I started off with an analysis by the Harvard Business School of chefs, French chefs and Spanish chefs, and how they came together to collaborate. And then, as a result of that, in that part of Spain, they have the most Michelin-starred restaurants in the entire world. So in other words, you can collaborate and still compete with each other as long as you focus yourself on that issue on the horizon that you're trying to solve. And that's really the crux of your question, Jason, is what is it that cities I find are fascinating. Working at it, I decided to walk the walk and go to MTA, being the chief innovation officer for the past year. And I've had basically two jobs: the pre-COVID pandemic job and the post-COVID pandemic job. And both are just an amazing examples of how people who provide daily service to people who live in their city have all kinds of challenges, and they focus on those challenges. And the stuff on the horizon that they want to focus on are great, like Debra's former boss, Mayor Peduto, excellent at articulating what it is that he's trying to get to. But for the most part, there is tech is not a solution in and of itself. Data is not a solution in and of itself, and neither is innovation. The solutions are driven to what the people are trying to resolve. So for me, it's a combination. In a university environment, when people start trying to figure out how do you bring these things together, transportation generally is like an engineering problem. Really, it's a multidisciplinary problem. And the problem goes to both development around transportation and the equity issues that follow. The United States is unfortunately famous for the equity issues that they have. I don't think we're alone. So I focus most of my time on the intersection between transportation and equity, and trying to solve those issues directly related to the things that are probably the most important to the mayors that I work with.
Yeah. And I will go on record saying I love the MTA. I know you get beat up sometimes, but I was a longtime resident of New York, and you can't live in New York without the MTA. And I actually perfected my swipe. So
nice. Well, now we have a tap. Now we have a tap, so it's a little bit easier.
It's a lost art.
Yeah. Well, I lived in New York when we had tokens. So yeah, that's progress, right? But MTA is it's the largest transit agency, one of the largest in the world. Half transit riders in the entire country are on our system. With pre-COVID about 8 million a day. We're at 24/7, 365. And the wonderful thing about New Yorkers is that we have 8 million critics every day of what we're doing wrong and how we can do it better, which is kind of fun. Before we get too far, I would like to congratulate Debra on potentially delivering, from my political perspective, Nirvana, in the sense that I know Debra was, Stacey Adams has nothing on Debra Lamb in terms of delivering the Senate. And so the reason why I say that, Jason, is a segue into the desert that has been between the goalposts of when President Obama left and when President Biden is going to come in, and the potential for if we have a 50-50 split in the Senate, the potential for a transportation infrastructure bill is very, very good. And that, then how do we think about this differently? Like, because when I listen to the other panelists, and I think in all their creative ways to bring funding in, the federal government of the United States has the potential of moving the needle with some of the funding. And to me, what is a ribbon between everybody from your work you do, Jason, on is the collaboration between the private sector and the public sector and the university, right? And those three corners form the triangle of a problem, right? And I worked with National Science Foundation in the past 4 years also with Smart and Connected Communities, which is an attempt to try to bring some of that together with the universities and cities. And it is a cultural clash. It is a communication problem. And I just want to identify that, because you can put private sector in the room, you can put universities, and you can put the government in the room, but unless you have interpreters like my fellow panelists to try to interpret those different things, you're not going to get anywhere. So that would be my highest recommendation, is to be able to have those interpreters like Debra and Kulle and Yael to be able to move between those spaces and work out the kinks that are going to happen.
Yeah, and everybody jump in and let's get some conversation going. But working off that, it seems to me that the Smart City Lab, again, whatever you call it, is a safe space to kind of tee up those shovel-ready projects and figure out what works and fail fast and all those other things, so that when there are investments, here are the projects that we can take to scale.
Right. But government and universities don't fail fast.
Yeah,
It's not what they do, and that's okay. I think that's okay. So the safe space, right, that you talk about, there has to be a purpose to it, right? There has to be an outcome you're driving towards. Like Debra, like I'm more familiar with what Debra's doing, and the outcome-driven aspect of what she's doing keeps all three of those sides of the triangle focused on the middle.
yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think? And any thoughts from the panel?
That was a softball to you, Debra.
Yeah, well, I was going to add, I mean, Mark made it articulated very well. What's interesting about this topic, and credit to Jason, is that, and we in the US are pretty US centric right now, but living in a very politically dynamic situation. But, I have this point, have worked on, red and blue, both sides of the aisle, like smart cities as that concept, or digital innovation, Jason, however you want to call it, is a pretty bipartisan issue that cuts across, because as Mark says, you're focused on addressing the problem. So, and these are problems that I think, whether you're red or blue or whatever political color or stripe, is something that is critical, that needs to be addressed. I think the pandemic really highlighted those inequities and really heightened the need and urgency to deal with these, especially in terms of building digital infrastructure, building digital literacy, really trying to address some of these larger issues that can't be addressed by any one small community or even, a New York City singularly. And so, the process that has been built in terms of innovation, whether it's in Estonia or Israel, I think is a process that's very focused on trying to address the problem, and then building the appropriate skills, tools, data analytics to address that problem. And kind of, I think it's an empowering way to strengthen the community at its core. And that has resonated with both sides of the aisle. And it's something that I think will be a really important way of addressing our issues, whether in the Department of Transportation, or even in the Department of Energy, or any one of these other federal government agencies that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. Yael, Kulle, any thoughts on that? And if not, let me give you a second question.
I would a little bit then comment, maybe just bringing the fourth side definitely onto the picture, because also, let's say, the final users, the citizens or the city officials using those final tools are definitely the ones to bring together with the public, private sector and academia. And this is something that sometimes the city, like the project people and also the academia, tries still to avoid, saying that kind of, we know what they need. So our task is to really to facilitate how they should involve the citizens already from the very early stage, to test even the idea and how to prototype and how to do the real life tests to find out, do we do the right thing, or is it just our imagination?
It's a great point. It's a great point, and that focus on the user, Kulle, is exactly right. It's exactly right.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And we use, I was going to work off that to segue into the methodology, maybe get a little tactical. At ASU at the KIC, we use the working backwards methodology. So we always start with a customer and their problem without a solution in mind. And then we work back from that to try to make sure we come up with a solution that is going to solve the specific problem for the specific customer. I was curious, what are some of the methodologies that you use in your innovation, whether it's design sprint or other processes? Is there anything that you found that really does help identify that customer, whether it's developing personas or journey mapping? Any tools that you're really drawn to as you go through the innovation process? And if that's too tactical, let me know. But any thoughts on that? Any processes you really like?
So we in the Civic Innovation Challenge that I helped with my colleague Ben Levine build for the National Science Foundation, we were able to get DHS and DOE, which are two federal agencies in the United States, to join with National Science Foundation, which is also a federal agency, and we kind of redesigned the Smart City Challenge to include a thing called boot camps, and the boot camps are what a lot of people, what Debra was saying earlier is exactly right. Getting people smarter, and there's a lot of barriers that stop them from getting in. So to me, just throwing yourself into here's the problem. How do I reverse engineer myself into a solution? Trying to deal with those barriers, and it's getting people smarter within that environment about the barriers and how do you work through that. So that boot camp piece of the Civic Innovation Challenge is a place to bring subject matter experts in, to bring folks in who understand some of these issues, to educate the folks. So even if they don't advance to the next round, they have now gotten educated on how to put together a data sharing agreement, and how to, what sounds so boring is critical to the success for a university, for the civic side, and for the private sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And any thoughts on that?
I think, may I jump in? I think it's similar here as well in Tel Aviv and Israel to what Kulle and Mark described. I mean, we start with a challenge first, and then we seek for a new innovative solution in the ecosystem. Because, everywhere we specify in startups, specific that comes with their already some sort of a initiate idea, or more than just an idea in their POC processes. Because, anywhere you look in a city, from trash pickup to transportation, traffic light management, and even just to policing, you're likely to find a technology that working to optimize the experience of the citizens and the residents. And those techs bring new solutions that answer the really difficult and complex challenges in the city needs. And sometimes, the market hasn't matured a well-established solution yet, and that's why we turn to startups. And the city here understands that working with startups, sometimes it's a very quick implementation and interactive, important cycle. Improvement of the cycle solutions, and a different kind of a fresh perspective, a point of view than whatever they might be able to receive from big tech companies. And more, as I mentioned before, as Israelis is always look for a lean approach, sort of less expensive projects. And oh yeah, sorry, Jason.
You're doing great.
So it basically allows us to, the whole concept and this structure of CityZone, it allows us to evaluate the startup solution through the open innovation platform, the actual startup program in a real life environment through the implementation process, examine the different solutions and the sensors and the different answers to the challenges that we can find. We specifically putting the emphasis of tech solutions, and by the end of it gives the city a tailor-made solution and push the startups toward commercialization, because we have also the other side of the story, not just the city officials and the challenges, but also the startups that founded and build their solution and their service or their product, and they need to scale and they need to exist even longer and after. Otherwise, we won't have a sustainable solution for our city to work with.
Absolutely. You may already know them, but there's an organization here in the U.S. that tries to match startups to challenges in cities called City Innovate, and they issue challenges and ask cities to submit problems. My question to you is, so are you engaging with startups that already have a solution? Or are you helping them to nurture a solution while they're at CityZone, or both, or something else?
So I think it's after the startup's finished with a well-founded idea and then towards a prototype from Kulle, they can come straight to city zone and then with a POC process work with the city officials towards like sort of a design, more of a design partner for the startup to work together.
And so coming off of that, I guess to all of you, I'd be curious. So what is a good outcome of a lab? Is it the creation of a startup? Kulle, you're doing these really big, long projects. Are you looking for a finished solution? Is it a lean prototype? Is it a white paper or just an idea? Or does it matter? Do you guys have thoughts on what some really good outcomes are that excite you and are helpful?
So I'll just start real quick because I think on what Yael said is that co-creation space, which is really, it's an overused term. It is really kind of the nirvana of Smart City Lab, of this, what we're talking about. Because if you can get, again, Kulle's correct, focus on the user, but if you can get the university with the capacity and the assets they bring to work with the civic side and the private sector to co-create a solution, that's the crown jewel to me, at least. And and if I was advising the Biden administration, and if they're going to do Smart Cities Part 2, that's what I would advise them to try to build. That type of mechanism to bring, because what happens often is with startups like, I at MT, I have the Transit Innovation Partnership, which is an accelerator built on the side of MTA to help us with this. It's an awesome asset for us to use. But oftentimes, what you're doing is you're trying to pull the solution that the startup has and apply it to a problem. Try to find the way to bring that in and solve the problem that you have. So, and that's not quite co-creation. That's adherence of an idea to a problem and try to figure it out that way and have the startup grow with the solution. And we did that with ultra wideband, brought in 2 startups, and they've stayed with us through the past 2 years and now growing into full-blown companies, which is awesome.
And I posted the link to the innovation advisors in the chat, Rachel and everything. What else? What do you guys think about that? What are some other good outcomes?
Yeah,
I guess okay. Okay, in our case, as said, it's 29 months and nearly over €1 million, so it has to be much more than an idea. So what we are mostly targeting is that the researchers are kind of, let's say, blamed that they write nice articles and research papers, but what's the benefit to the society out of it? So we are trying to get really the research results to be implemented on the streets, on the real city environments. So the result should be already a solution that is implemented in 2 cities. Of course, it's not final, but still, this is implemented in 2 cities. And now it's ready for scaling and fine tuning and scaling for other cities. But it can be a startup that comes out of it, but it is not a must. It can be also a service. It can be a technology that could be sold out or a model that can be replicated then in other cities.
And do you line up the governance? So if I'm doing a project and I get one of your awards and say I need to go hang something on a street light or put up sensors or have access to data, are you able to help work through all of that, or is that kind of part of the project? They have to go figure that out as they go?
As in our projects, in all of them, there are minimum 2 cities are involved already. So we facilitate that they work together, but definitely the cities jump on board. So we guarantee that they are ready to pilot it. So it should not be the city top level that only signs the paper that we will be in, but we ask the real doers. So if it's something to do with the transport, then we need to have the transport division involved in the project. And they have to guarantee at the beginning, and we check it that these are the people that are involved.
That's awesome. And Debra, you were going to say something, I think?
Yeah, and I'm really glad that I spoke after Kulle, because my answer is a mix between market and Kulle. Obviously, partnership is fundamental to all of this, and you need to have that incentive for public sector to work with private sector, to work with universities, and even within the university system, force multidisciplinary research, which I think is actually a tougher sell in some cases, to have different disciplines work together to address complex problems. But the other thing I think is different in terms of your question of performance metrics or success, is that for this space, it's still not fully quantifiable in the same way that you deal with traditional like corporate innovation. If Yael was talking about, with startups, it's very clear, you're talking about the amount of money that you're bringing in, maybe the jobs that you're creating, the commercialization rates, etc. But when we're talking about smart city, ultimately you're or the civic innovation challenge that Mark's talking about, it's ultimately about the public good, right? You're talking about improving the human condition. And that is less quantifiable in some cases and based on the local context. So it's a greater challenge, I think, in terms of trying to define, if this is improving the human condition and how best to measure that improvement. But it's definitely a challenge that we always are very cognizant of, and constantly making sure that we are trying to address these fundamental challenges. But it's less about dollars and commercialization kind of metrics that I think is out there.
Right.
Awesome.
And I just to add in real quick, it'll be real quick. Deborah's hit the nail on the head in the sense that like mayors and stuff, they're not usually in their seat for the entire point of what they're trying to do. So they do like the shiny things, which are like, I don't know. I'm not going to bang on anybody, but they like the shiny things that demonstrate to their citizens that they're a smart city, which is often a distraction and difficult place to be.
Absolutely. We're getting short on time, and I think we could probably talk all day. This is just an awesome conversation. There's one last thing I wanted to kind of ask you guys. So I don't know of any really successful smart city initiative that doesn't involve the university. I mean, they're a pretty essential anchor tenant. In working with universities, whether it's faculty, whether it's students, whether it's the admin, any thoughts on how to like engage students? I think exposing students, getting them the training and involving them ideally in the build and deployment is a really beautiful thing. Any thoughts on engaging, working with students, or ideally getting them to build solutions?
I can start with that. I think that was a nice plug, shameless plug that I will give. In Georgia, we set up the Smart Community Corps. So that's modeled after AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, and it's a full-time summer fellowship that places students in the community working on the Smart City project. So it's experiential learning, it's working with the community, and they're on the forefront of working on a Smart City project. And so we are going to be opening up our application process. And there'll be 4 sites across Georgia, and it will be in pairs. So it'll be a Georgia Tech student paired up with another local university student. So we'll have 2 in Metro Atlanta, that's Georgia Tech, and then an HSBCU student. So someone from Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, Spelman. And then we'll have 1 in Valdosta with Valdosta State University, and then another in Savannah with Georgia Southern. So it's a good pairing of local student experts that are complementing with some of the Georgia Tech engineering, computer science expertise, and they get paid $8,000 for the summer. So
wow.
We try to keep it very competitive.
That's a great idea. So all the folks on from ASU, I see Di Bowman and John Rome and Ryan Hendricks. There's no shame in stealing good ideas. But that's a phenomenal way to engage students. So thank you for sharing that. Last, we got a couple of minutes left. Any final thoughts any advice to people that want to start their own labs, or if there was, if we could give you a blank check, is there anything that you would love to help take your center to the next step? And any final thoughts?
I would just, one quick thought is to build on Deborah's point about the university-city relationship. It is fraught. I'll just say that it's fraught, and it's not because of good intentions, just because of one fills potholes, the other is studying the issue, and those two don't always line up well. So any lab that includes city, the civic side and the university side needs to make sure that they have their interests aligned.
Great point.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I would add for the end that this running such labs, because it's also a kind of a community, so you need to be proactive, make your hands dirty, go into the projects, and not to like, okay, I gave you money and now do your thing, and then maybe, I don't know, show what the results are, but really go together with the teams, be involved and help them, and then you can get the best results, also like bringing in those different sides.
Fantastic.
I think if I may add, as mentioned earlier, focusing on municipality challenges that already have some budget allocated to solve is a good idea to start from. Else the entrepreneurs, the researchers, they expect to move faster than actually possible towards procurement agreement at the end of the evaluation processes. And, but if the issue is not budgeted, the likelihood is that there will be a disappointment on all sides. So it's not just speeding up the governmental organization and the city's point of view, but actually being able to slow down from the entrepreneurs, the startup, the other side of the story with good expectation management through open and transparent communications. As Mark mentioned before, entrepreneurs sometimes need someone to translate city speak or for them and help them to understand the processes, the phase, and what's expected at the end of it.
Absolutely. And, that's something when we're sourcing challenges at the ASU KIC, I think there's almost like a maturity curve. So up here, there's ideas that are already too far along. They've got their champions, they've got their budget, they know what they want to do. It's hard to help them innovate. And then down here, the ideas that are so nascent, they're not prioritized. There's no one who wants to carry them. So if you go spend a lot of time with them, there's no logical next step. We try to find those projects that someone's prioritized in a strategic plan, in a budget, in a vision statement, vision document, but they're jammed up for some reason. They can't bring all the stakeholders together. They can't nail down what the exact problem or what they're trying to do. And that seems like a really good place for the Smart Lab to play in unlocking, unjamming some of those things and helping to move them along in a way that they probably wouldn't on their own. So I think that's a great point. So we're pretty much at time. I know that was kind of fast and we kind of went from topic to topic, but I really enjoyed that conversation. I think we should do this every week. And again, for those listening, I would encourage you to follow these guys and look at their work. You can definitely learn a lot from them. And hopefully we'll all get together again and let us know if we can answer any questions. I think there were some questions in the chat. I will try to make sure those get answered if they weren't already. And then with that, thank you so much for joining us. And to our panel, thank you so much for participating and staying up late and for saving democracy and for creating the vision for the next step. So you guys are awesome and look forward to seeing what you do next. So
thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
yeah.